If you are considering making an application to the Commonwealth scholarships this year, then this conversation is for you. Today we are joined by Olusegun Bamidele. He's a master's student at the University of Bristol, and he's currently on the Commonwealth Scholarship. So in this conversation, as you would expect in every other podcast that we host, we are going to discuss about all the aspects you as a potential scholar need so that you can make a successful application. This includes information about how you're going to write the essays, how you're going to make an application to your potential institution, and the nature of support you would expect from Commonwealth Scholarship. Also, Segun is currently a prospect. He's going to join a PhD at the University of York. So it means we are going to discuss how he is planning to transition from the Commonwealth Scholarship to his PhD at York. So I hope you're going to get all the necessary information you expect. Hi, Segun. How are you?
Hi, Joseph. I'm fine. How about you?
I'm fine. So for somebody who has just seen you here for the first time, who is Bamidele Segun?
All right. My name is Bamidele Segun. Bamidele is the surname, and then Segun is like the first name. And like you rightfully introduced, I'm currently pursuing a master's in climate change science and policy at the University of Bristol, funded by the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission. So I think aside my academic interests, I'm also someone who loves sports a lot and generally love history and I think sciences. So just a combination of those. So those are things I generally love to learn or spend my time on without feeling the pressure to deliver a deadline or excel in a grade and this kind of stuff. Yeah. So generally that is just some view overview about me.
You know, when we talk about Commonwealth scholarships, there are a lot of subdivisions of this scholarship, and I know people sometimes get confused. So we have the Commonwealth Shared Scholarship, we have the Commonwealth Master's Scholarship, we have the Commonwealth PhD Scholarship, and we have the Commonwealth Distance Learning Scholarship. So which scholarship are you on specifically, and what is the difference between this scholarship and the others?
All right. On the Commonwealth Shared Scholarship, and like you've mentioned, there are about five of them, but the one specifically for masters are the Commonwealth Masters, the Commonwealth Shared, the Commonwealth Distance Learning Scholarship, and I think of recent they recently opened a new scheme for small islands and developing, I think, small island countries under the Commonwealth. But I'm on the Commonwealth Shared Scholarship, and what makes it different from the Commonwealth Masters and distance learning is that the Commonwealth Shared Scholarship, from the word shared, it's like a shared obligation between the university or the institution you want to study in and then the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission. So they have a shared responsibility of support towards your studies, depending on which institution you are going to. Some institutions are the one responsible for your stipends and maybe some part of your school fees, while the Commonwealth takes some other responsibility. For some, it is the Commonwealth that take care of maybe the school fees, while they take care of the stipend and maybe traveling expenses, whatever the agreement is generally. But that is one. Then, secondly, the institutions are also actively involved in the selection process. So, because they are the one who will be partly funding your study, so they tend to choose a candidate that best fits the type they really want to select. So, they are the one responsible for reading your essays and then nominating their most preferred candidates. But when you look at the Commonwealth Masters, the difference is the essays are not different. The questions are the same, but for Commonwealth Masters, the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission is now saying we are entrusting the selection or part of the selection processes to some nominating agencies or to the federal government of your country, whichever one you prefer. And amongst these nominating agencies are some NGOs that are not related to the government. So if you identify as a female, for example, you could use the Forum for, I think, Advancement for Women Education, also known as FAWE. If you are specially abled, there are some NGOs for that. there are a whole lot of NGOs that have been accredited, if I can use that word, by the Commonwealth to nominate candidates, and then you can, if you don't feel you meet the requirement of these NGOs, then your government comes in. You can. There's also the Federal Scholarship Board in your specific country, and they have their recruitment or selection processes. So that is what makes it different from shared, where the universities are the one in charge. But for Commonwealth Masters, the NGOs and the agencies are the one in charge. Then, from what I now know, even after getting nominated by these agencies or by the scholarship boards, the Commonwealth then now sits down and then decides based on available funding how many of these nominees can we award. So it happens that I now realize that even getting nominated by the agencies or the government of your country does not automatically mean you've won. So the Commonwealth still needs to confirm your awards. I've seen cases where people who got nominated by agencies were finally placed on reserved by the Commonwealth due to insufficient funds or whatever. So it's kind of like a two-stage selection process. But for shared, if you get nominated by your university or by your institution of choice, 99% of the time, except you fail to meet the condition of your offer in that school. But so far, you don't have any other condition to meet. 99, in fact, I'll probably say 100% of the time because I haven't seen someone who got nominated and who has met all conditions and then the award is not confirmed. So that is what I can say is also the difference. From the word distance learning, it simply means you don't need to travel outside your country. It's like a virtual program where you communicate or attend classes online and you don't need to travel outside of your country. So yeah, it's a distance learning. It's for distance learning. People prefer distance learning.
Yeah, so during your application, I'm sure you went through several stages of the application process. Now, you being a shared applicant, I know the essays are the same, and every single document you're going to submit is more or less the same, although there's a difference in procedure when it comes to where you're going to make your submissions. I think we did a video on how you can make an application to the Commonwealth Master Scholarship. Now, for the shared aspect, where, of course, if you are applying for them, if you as a listener is applying for the Commonwealth Master Scholarship, the essays are going to be approached more or less in the same way. The difference is where do you submit the application. Now, what was expected of you? What did you have to submit as the documents necessary during this application? And how was the application structured? Did you start by applying to the university first, or did you go applying to the funding?
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So, for the documents, generally, when the scholarship opens, typical, I think, expected for all candidates is to first of all check the overview, check the supporting documents, just be sure you have everything needed. And generally, what they ask of you are, I would say, what you should have as a scholarship hopefuls is just the transcript, your international ID, which is your passport or maybe your national ID, and I think your first degree certificate, and in some cases they even accept statement of results.
Now let's focus this conversation strictly on the Commonwealth Shared Scholarship. While making an application, I understand you're supposed to write essays, and there are a couple of essays. The good thing is I have these essay questions with me. Sometimes maybe the questions might be tweaked a little bit, but so far in the past 3-4 years that I've come across this scholarship, the questions are still the same. Now, the first thing is a person is supposed to choose the theme in which they belong, and that should not be difficult because when you go to the call document, they usually specify where your program falls. Like if you want a master's degree in environmental science at the University of Bristol, then they are going to provide you with like this falls in this category. But then once you've identified that, there is there are the SDGs, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I know there are 17. How do you go about selecting which SDG aligns best with your theme?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So, um, like you said, there are teams and then there are SDGs. So, when you look at the teams in on the Commonwealth, there's also a page on the Commonwealth website where, if you need to understand more about the teams, they give you an explanation on what does this team mean to us as a Commonwealth, how does it fit into our objectives, basically. So then, I also believe that the SDG, like you said, it's 17, and if there's something that has become part of everyone's education nowadays, in this generation, it's a sustainable development. Sustainable in everyone talks about it. So I believe as a scholarship graduate, one of the first thing you need to even know is how your plan, your study, and what sustainable development goal it relates to. But yes, sometimes it can be confusing because even the SDGs are kind of interrelated and intertwined. So for someone like me who is studying climate change science and policy, there's an SDG goal 13 named climate action. So I know that, for example, for someone who studies climate change science, I mean, the essence of research, studying everything is to influence policies. And then when you talk of policies, you also want policies to influence a change of probably behavior or an action. So I know, for example, that my course is related to climate action. But beside climate action, I also thought of life on land. And this depends on what I plan to do, probably my impact. Am I going to talk on how to be, is my impact going to be directly related to how we should be more responsible with maybe land resources, for example? Or is it about aquatic resources? If it's aquatic resources, then I think there's one on life on water or something. And I also know that there's partnership for the goals. That is SDG 17. I mean, for everything you do, you need partnership. I personally even feel there's no anyone writing an essay with the Commonwealth. SDG 17 is one part people tend to overlook. And yet, what can you do without partnership? Probably little. So there's partnership for the goals, and how do you build this partnership or whatever? So I personally even feel SDG 17 is automatically for everyone. Then depending on where your area of interest is, then you can choose any other two. If you're in finances, maybe you're trying to look at innovations, you're trying to look at access, inclusion, and opportunities. I don't know. It just depends on you. But yeah, just looking at the SDG, looking at what each one of them is addressing and how they fit into your immediate plan. You can just choose
So,
whichever.
if I get you correctly, the first thing is once you identify your theme and you know
Yes.
my program that I'm going to apply to falls in this theme, you need to sit down and reflect. Where does this program fit in which sustainable development goal, right? So out
Yeah.
of the 17, you are at liberty to choose any, but having been through that process and having mentored people who have been through that process, you need to be able to justify what you've chosen as your SDG. Because now, from this point onwards, I expect you're going to make a lot of reference to your sustainable development goals because that
Mm-hmm.
is actually what is going to motivate your writing. And this being that we are now learning from Segun, of course, if you want to know my perspective, you could just go back and check the videos that I've done. So let's learn from Segun today about how he perceives this and how he would go on writing based on his experience. Now, Commonwealth has a lot of essays, not so many. The first essay needs around 200 words. And I allow me to read because I am looking at it directly. It says, tell us how your proposed study relates to the development issues at the global, at the national, and at the local level. And then development issues connected to your chosen CSC development theme and the wider sector. So what goes into this? We have 200 words. Allow me to interrupt this conversation and bring something to your attention. Since we launched this podcast a few months ago, we've had over 50,000 people watching our episodes, which we are very thankful for, and over 12,000 hours. However, we are currently trying to build our audience so that we can get the leverage to invite more guests to our podcast and we can continue bringing more insights. As you can see in one of these sites, and I bet that's here, at least 80.7% of the people watching our podcasts are not subscribers to this channel. And what we are currently focusing on is building our audience. So I'm requesting that if you may like to support us, if you like what we are sharing, you support our channel by clicking that subscribe button so that we can grow. Our promise is to continue bringing you strong guests with more insights so that we can bring these conversations where you are. 200 words.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah, so we have 200 words, and that simply means you don't really have enough word to probably beat around the bush. So they are asking how your developmental plans relate to the wider CSC sector, as well as the local, the national, and then the international. So one way I started my application is to first of all start from the broader perspective. So more like the funnel approach from broad to narrow. So I started with how, for example, the climate crisis. It's because my CSC team is also strengthening resilience and response to crisis. So how the climate crisis itself has impacted the world. So it's not just about my country, it's not just about my local community, it's a global issue. Again, like I said, justifying this. So I started with from the global perspective, and I prefer using figures because I love evidence-based storytelling, and then quoting or citing reputable organizations like probably the United Nations Environmental Program or the IPCC or whichever reputable organizations in my area, telling them how the world has warmed or the devastating effects of global warming, climate change, this kind of stuff. Then from there, I also now come back to my country, Nigeria. Okay, at the national level, how has it affected us? We know that this is what is happening at the global level, but what makes it even particularly interesting to someone like me who is from Nigeria? So I also try to argue for my country, like, okay, look at it, we're not even that industrialized. And yet we seem to be part of the countries from the global south that are experiencing some of these devastating effects much, and it's just kind of unfair, Then I go to my local communities, talk about how it has impacted also this kind of stuff. So that is how I break it down. Then the wider CS sector, which is now the team. So this is me now proposing a solution that, okay, I intend to study this course at the University of Bristol because it would equip me with this knowledge. And from this knowledge, I can do this. Probably it could be something like quantitative skills, maybe in modeling. Okay, existing climate models are not really effective in Africa because we were not even the one producing them. They are produced by most of these countries from the global north. So, but once I can get good skills in quantitative modeling, I can at least correct bias from climate models and make them more suitable to regions where I come from that are kind of underrepresented. Just proving that I know what I'm doing, what I want to say, and I'm very intentional about that. And most importantly, what is the impact? Based on this, it will lead to improved early warning system, more disaster management, approach, more proactive method, and so many things that can then strengthen resilience and response to crisis. So I still come back to the things to the CSC team, and then also talk about how we then promote SDG 13 and maybe life on land. I think SDG 5, and so that is how I start. So start from the broad to the more specific. Then think about, identify skills you want to learn and how you apply the skills, and then talk about how this impacts the CSC development teams themselves. Because at the end of the day, this is the aim of the scholarship. So
Yes, so you call it the funnel approach, but you need to offer some quantitative evidence if you could, right? From reputable sources. Sometimes I like to do that so that we pick the key points as we are moving. Because
yeah,
I usually expect when somebody is listening to our conversations, I know sometimes they sound like lectures where you
Mm.
you are going to a lecture hall and listening to how you are doing it. But based on the feedback I've gotten, this is how people would prefer it. So we are trying to do it that way until maybe one of you tells me it is we should try to do it differently. Now, the next part we have another question which requires you to write 100-word essay, and it says, "Tell us how you intend to apply your new skills and qualifications when you return back home." Then they give you guidance on how you may want to frame your answer. You may wish to reference innovation and application of knowledge at a global, national, or local level, and to include intended methodologies and implementation strategies.
yeah. So to me, it's 100 words. So I personally believe at that particular time they just want a summary, or yeah, some I would just call summary of what you propose to do. So they are also giving you the opportunity to, you know, learn from the ideas of others. You don't. It's not important you come up with something you invent, or something that is you innovated. You can reinvent the wheel if there's an existing wheel. Hence, why they say you can also reference a methodology that you have. So, I think one way I tend to um, advise about going through this is looking at go back to your development impact one and look at how you said you apply your skills. Now, come back to development impact two, be more specific. Now, you have 100 words, so you can't even beat around the bush as well. But what exactly do you plan to do when you get back home? Or do you have organizations you plan to partner with, or a particular thing you need to do? And even if you don't have an idea, I used to advise go to the CSC website. There's this, they have a page for, I think, development webinar or something where scholars that have gone back to their countries and have been doing one or two things share their story. I tell people learn from them. If you have someone working in your area, learn from them. That is why you can reference them. Okay, you can talk about how a particular scholar is doing something in Bangladesh, and you realize due to the fact that Nigeria has similar issue, or whichever country you come from, you feel this approach would also work. But this is an extra thing you plan to add to it. Probably you now want to make it more specific, more localized based on so. But again, it's 100 words, so you have to summarize them. And I personally believe the fact that they're giving you an option to, reference an existing methodology or framework you feel has worked also even makes it easier. Just think deeper about how you can improve on something that has already been done or something that is currently being worked upon. So yeah.
I don't know if you remember how you went about writing these essays.
Yeah.
Where were you
The,
getting all this information during your time? Where are you pulling all this information from?
um I I just tried to during my time I don't okay, yeah, I was watching, I think I came on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get informations. I attended webinars, then I met some scholars as well, trying to. But it gets to a stage where there were a whole lot of informations right out there. Like this one is saying this one is saying this one is saying that, this video is saying this, and then it can sometimes get confused because you are trying to apply tips from everything you've had. But it turns out there are some areas where everyone is saying the same thing. So if everyone is saying the same thing, then that means this thing is working. Then there are some areas where everyone is a little bit different. Not that they're contradictory, but everyone is a little bit unique. So, and it's made me realize that even though there is something that looks the same in everyone's story, there's also the unique part where you must just do something new, something very specific to you, something you know that someone who has even attended the same webinar as you are and who will be competing with the same sport would not think of. So I think that is something that I also tend to encourage. Yes, there's a general way to apply, there's a general tip, but if you can also come up with something unique that someone who is also applying and has attended the same webinars, met the same mentors, basically has done everything you have done, but will not think of, that is what makes you stand out. It's a risk. So I just thought about them, and the Commonwealth
Yeah.
website is, yeah.
Let's go to the third essay.
Yeah.
Tell us what you expect to change in development terms following your studies, including the outcomes of your aim, the outcomes that you aim to achieve, time frame, and who the beneficiaries will be.
Yeah, so this is, to me, an opportunity to them explain more in details the summary you've given in development impact. So, because one thing I noticed about the Commonwealth, there are about, is it 10 or 11 essays? A whole lot of them. But when you think deeply, when you think critically about these essays, some of them looks the same. I mean, and you would realize that when you start writing, and you'll be like, oh, I'm still saying the same thing I've said somewhere. I'm still saying the same thing. It's just repetitive. It's not really a problem. It's just that there are some places where they expect you to summarize. There are some places where they expect you to be more specific and detailed. So, in my own opinion, development impact theory is an opportunity for you to now buttress or explain more in details the plan you've already summarized in development impact. So,
Okay.
so this is where you now talk about, okay, during my studies in the UK, I plan to maybe in my research investigate the status of climate models in the global south. I'm just trying to form something out of my head now. And then through this, I hope to get findings on areas where global climate models have been found to be biased or inadequate in Nigeria. So when I now come back using this knowledge, for someone in tech and who is into quantitative stuff, one of the emphasis I made was how I plan to train people in tech. So more like climate tech gurus or whichever name we call them. Because I was in tech and I was dealing with machine learning and code. And I also noticed that even my own course of study, emphasis is placed on quantitative skills, modeling, a lot of machine learning stuff. So I aligned even my development impact to it. So basically, I didn't just get all of this inspiration because I slept or I just attended web. I also went to the school website. Like I said, it's the school that will nominate you. And whoever is probably going to lead your essay might be a program coordinator or tutor from the department you'll be studying in. So they need some sort of technical argument that shows that this person is also scientifically sound in this area of study.
Yeah.
So I have gone through the course webpage. I have seen the type of students they want to admit, the type of skills or the objective, the intended learning outcomes, as they call it, in this student and the like. And then I framed my development impact in that area. So based on the skills this I will learn from my course, what are the impacts my school would even want me to make out there as a graduate. So most of my development impacts were aligned there. So I talk about how I will train climate tech gurus on using machine learning to predict climate variability and to improve climate models. Then, because I also have an experience working in the Nigerian education system, I talked about how climate education needs to be a part of our curriculum. And even though that is generally the work of the government, but it can start with probably having what do you call this? Is it co-curricular activities like having groups in schools, maybe like climate change clubs, where these children where these children gets to learn about climate change, even if it is not entirely embedded in the curriculum. Those kind of and I justified it. I showed that this is not something that is just coming out of my head. I showed how I have been doing this even before the scholarship, and then how the scholarship would then put me in a better position to even do better. So I talk about my experience already in the education system and also as someone in tech. But now based on this study, this is the other skills I will improve on or I will gain, and this is what I want to do.
And question 4 then goes, how can the impact of your work be measured?
Yeah, so this is also a very dicey question. So it's basically talking about metrics because I test people. Just think about it this way: you have been awarded the Commonwealth Scholarship, and you're about to finish, or you'll soon finish, and then you have surveys afterwards asking you about what you have been doing, how you have been engaging, basically. Now, what are those things you would include as evidence that you're making impact? So just first of all, like start with backward. Is it for did they call it forward thinking approach or something? Like go to the end, think about it, like supposing you are in the future and they're asking you what are those things you will want, then write them down, then how do you develop it? So for someone like me, initially, I was not keen. At the time I was applying for my master's, I wasn't really sure I'll go for a PhD. I knew I would go for a PhD later in future, but I wasn't so sure whether it's going to be immediate. So things like, for example, academic journals or conferences, basically stuff that are academically related, were not in my plan. But I have since realized, based on engagement with other scholars, that that's another way. You could talk about publications, or if you have a blog and you consistently do research, you want to share your findings, you want to influence critical thinking discussions in that field. And people use that like, okay, the amount of blogs posts I will make and the people it reach, the publications I would publish every year. But for me, I talk about numbers because I was talking about training climate tech goals. So I said the number of people I would train every year. I think I have the number. I was specific about it. I said 30 or something. So every year I aim to train about 30 climate techies. And so that is one way I will measure it. Then I also talk about creating climate change clubs in schools. So I talk about the schools and then the number of children that would be members of that club. So those are what I used as evidence.
I'll tell you another an approach that I usually propose to scholars, but it's best I tell you when we are when we are having the last two essays. It supplements what you're saying, but we have this very critical part here, and this critical part can be compressed into two questions actually, but there are like 5 questions in this part. So the first part says, describe the skills that you expect to gain from this scholarship and your career plans once you return home. Now, because these questions are related, how about, because the next question is career plans in 5 years, then career
Mm-hmm.
plans in the long run, that is the long term, right? And each
Yeah,
of these has 250 words each. So, how about we handle this as one block of a question? Because these are very closely related concepts.
yeah. So the career path question, both the long-term career goals and the short-term one, right? Is it just the career path, or does it
Yeah,
include
yeah, yeah.
study?
Actually, it asks the objectives in
Okay.
the short run, medium term, and long term.
Oh, great. Yeah, those three. So yeah, one way I tend to also the way I approach it is to first of all talk about what do I want to do while studying. That is my own personal objective. Like, what are my aims? Okay, apart from studying, I want to study climate change science policy at the University of Bristol. What are the other extra activities I want to engage in? And again, why? Because for every objective you have, there must be a reason. Yeah, there must be a reason. So if your objective is to do this, there must be a why behind it. So if it is to join clubs, why do I want to join clubs? For example, maybe you have climate change clubs. I didn't have climate change clubs at the University of Bristol, but there were some institutes. And I specifically mentioned that I want to join this institute, Cabot Institute. Why? Because I noticed that they tend to organize symposiums and seminars where researchers, PhD researchers, postdoc researchers, they come to share findings or discuss things going on in the field. And for someone like me, I want to go to such places to gain knowledge about trends in the field. Basically, what is happening, what are the current research focusing on, and is there a way that my country is left behind? This kind of stuff. I mean, that represents a gap. And if it is being left behind, what can I do? So I talk about that. And again, I justified it because the essence is to gain knowledge and then to see how I can apply this at home. So I also talk about attending CSC events, workshops, and as I then, the most um, important event I knew was just to connect and collaborate. I didn't even know about some other events like the Cumberland, Mazimazin Development Department, this kind of stuff. So I talk about how during the connect and collaborate, I plan to meet other scholars, particularly those from the same team as I am, but are studying different courses. Okay, I scholar so and so from Zambia or India. How do you plan to also help the Commonwealth strengthening resilience and response to crisis? Learn from them, learn from their plan, even build potential collaboration. So I talk about that again. Then that's that. Now in my career plans, which I started with the short term career plans. Again, I made sure my objectives and career plans are kind of interrelated because the essence of those objectives I have planned was to make sure when I get home, I can apply either the connection, I can leverage on either the connections I've built or use the skills I've learnt, or even if it's just the research um, ideas I got from attending seminars. How do I carry out this research in my own country? Or basically those kind of. So I make sure that all my immediate career plans and actions are still related back to the objectives I have mentioned. I was always going back to that. As mentioned in my objective on um, gaining skills in social and so. As soon as I return back home, using these skills, I would visit the Federal Ministry of Environment to get permission to train environmentalists or environmental scientists on climate modeling in Nigeria. In addition, using, just making sure there's some sort of consistency. Then for my long-term career plans, so that one is a little bit ambitious as expected because it's long term. I think that was when enough talk about the possibility of doing a PhD because I believe by then I should be experienced enough to know some of the issues affecting my country that has not been addressed and that needs further research on. And I talked about, but of course, this is in future. So based on my current understanding now, whatever I think is happening now might not be the problem in future. So I just propose something I feel might still be a problem. So I told them that okay, subsequently, I plan to investigate the I can't even remember what I proposed again, but I also realized it's still like an extension of what I propose in my study outline. Like there's a part of that study outline where you talk about what you plan to do, what topic you plan to research on. So I make sure that it's kind of an extension on it, and I justify how I plan to do it in a much more broader way it can make impact. So objectives during the award, what do you want to do and why do you want to do this? Career plans, this is when you then prove how these objectives you've mentioned will be very relevant to your career plans because you are not just mentioning random stuff and then when it's career plans, those things are no longer relevant. So make sure the stuff you've mentioned in the objectives are relevant to your career plans. Then your long-term career plans may be something more audacious. Of course, they expect that as Commonwealth scholars, you have that potential. They expect that in the next 15, 20 years, you are really at that position. So it's okay to blow your trumpet to set that dream to them where you want to be, and so that's how I handled that part.
Yeah. There's always an extra source where we say always refer back to your the problems you identified
Mm.
because this can also give you ideas on what you want to do in the immediate course after you return maybe to your country. Maybe you identified, there's an essay you wrote back there about whatever problems you see, whatever the very first essay, we were extracting facts about national, international, national, and then local level. You may also say, I want to go solve some of those problems in the most immediate moment.
Mm.
But I mean, you can always, as Segun said, you can always come up with your own ingenious way to address this. But you need to provide what we'd call realistic objectives. So don't start saying things that probably, okay, they might be realistic, but they might be a little bit far-fetched. For example, you might start promising people that you want now to take people to Mars and the likes. So that one, yeah, it is possible, but it could be. Does it align with the interests of the institution that is funding you? And this does not only apply to Commonwealth, it applies actually to almost every other scholarship. Do your objectives align with the interests of who is funding you and the program that you're taking and the problem at hand? So if your objectives do not align, then there's going to be a very difficult way for you to raise an argument. But then, now let's look at this. They have told you to provide your objectives: short term, medium term, long term. Then the next part is, now they want you to talk about the program that you're applying to, and there is the work that you want to do on this program. And this is how they frame that question. That's question 8. Provide a short outline of your proposed study or research. This should be written for an audience that does not have any prior knowledge, so not too technical, of the subject, and must not be, okay, that too technical was actually in that statement, overly technical. Any abbreviations, which I strongly discourage, or specialist terms must be explained. So when we say, sorry, so when we say that, it means don't use abbreviations that have not, and this is a standard practice in research.
And
Don't use abbreviations that have not been explained. So you have to, maybe if it's COP, is it Conference of Parties?
artists.
Yeah, you can't say COP27. You have to tell us first what it is. Okay, that is a more standard thing, but along those lines. So you have to tell us what it means before you start now writing down, especially if you are now trying to talk about something technical. There's something my prof usually tells me about. It's usually said, don't write to look clever, write to communicate. Now, how would you write to communicate and not look clever?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Like you said, it's a right to communicate because there's also the possibility whoever is reading your essays is not even from, it's not that, it's not from your area of study. Let me use that word. And so you just have to always assume that whoever is reading it, your essay, has little knowledge, little technical knowledge about what is going on. So be more interested in communicating than just trying to show you know a lot in that area. So for the study outline, this is one part where some people have various opinion. I have heard of people say summarize what your course of study is, and one way to go is you just go to the course website, understand it, then come back in your own words. What do you understand? What will you gain? What is the essence of that course? And in what way are the graduates of that course likely to make impact on the world? Those kind of stuff. Then I have also heard from some sources who've believed it's like a proposal, 125 words. So short, mini proposal or summary of what you plan to study. Like, yeah, you are coming to study this course, but under this course, if you have to write a dissertation, what will it be on? And why, or what is the sense? And I tend to probably agree with that line of thought because I just believe there's still another area where they call detailed plan of study, where you then have enough opportunity to probably talk about your course. But some people also feel that is the opportunity for you to talk about your dissertation or whatever you will research on. But to me, the study outline, what I did was to summarize what I plan to research. So I talked about how I start with a problem statement, just the same way I would do in a research proposal. So started with why I'm interested in that topic and why am I interested in it. So I started with for example, poorly analyzed climate data are responsible for deficiencies in early warning signals. As a result of this, it is important to, you know, probably make analysis of climate data much more accurate and the like. Hence, I plan to study what is the name? I just came up with something. I can't remember some of this name, but basically, I'm trying to justify why I will plan to research this topic, and then I also talk about why it is important for me to study or do that research. I like using why a lot because I just believe for everything you claim you should do, sometimes give them it will not make sense to who is reading it, but when you justify it, it might make sense. So definitely, why am I interested in doing this? Again, it's related back to my previous statement. Where do I intend to get my data from? And what are the potential implication of this research? Yeah. So I summarize all of this thing in 125 words. So that's what I did under that aspect. Then there's a part under detailed plan of studies where I talk more about my modules and then still come back to my dissertation as well.
Yeah, I know this is the one part where there are a lot of opinions, and no unique opinion works. Because as I said, I actually wrote your version during my time where I talked about the problem that I want to research, then came down here to talk about the the problem in detail and how the program will help me get to the problem, like solve the problem. But where I'm reading these questions, I'm reading them from an essay I reviewed last year from an applicant who will be coming down south to London. And so I can see what the answers that this applicant wrote. They're on the other side of the coin, and actually the applicant was accepted. So it means there's no clear-cut way
Yeah.
on how we could write this. My version was different from this applicant's version, but both of us were awarded. So my version and yours, they more or less align. But this applicant is the different version. Now, if we stick to what we have on this, then the number 9 question, which is more or less the last one before we now talk about the other two big essays, is now in 300 words, provide a detailed plan of your proposed study. The selection panel will want to understand why you have selected your proposed course and university. Then they give you 3 prompts. And I usually like it when they give you these 3 prompts because you have 300 words, so sometimes it's too little. I don't know how people think about whether 300 is a lot or little, but I think it's too little for you to write something so intense about research. Now, they're saying why you have chosen the university. The next thing, what you're looking for in the course. And the third thing, the dissertation topic that you have in mind. How did you go about it?
Yeah. So now, I mean, there's something I have to say. Like, looking back now at, like, I'm 1 month away from completing my study, and looking at what I wrote then, I'll probably even have said that what I even wrote then and what the way I now understand the question now
Yeah,
would have been different. And I
yeah.
will tell you why. So what I wrote then, I talked about the course of study again. Again, I started with the problems, and even on the course web page, I noticed that generally they always start with a global issue in the world. For example, a course on that is trying to encourage a circular economy. For example, we might talk must start with problem about unsustainable waste practices in the world and something like that, and then justify why their course of study would equip students with skills or skills that would make them basically world should I say world changers and make them wanted in the corporate words or scientific words depending on which pathway they want. So I started with that problem, then referred back to my modules, each one of them, not all of them, the most important one that I feel is very relevant to the skills I wanted. So I went back to the modules and explained how a module like, for example, climate change science and impact would equip me with the understanding of the sciences behind climate change. Yes, there's been climate changes, there's been global warming, but most people only understood the effects. They tend to view it from the developmental implication of it. But for this, my course, it is important to also understand the sciences behind climate change. Basically, what are the atmospheric, physical, and chemical, or biogeochemistry, whatever, that has come to play to make this happen? Because by the time we are talking of reversing climate change, beyond just net zero action, sustainable practices, we also need to understand, is there a way we can reverse some of these atmospheric reactions that are not generally um, part of our everyday living? This kind of stuff. So I justify how that module will equip me with that knowledge. So I talked about each modules. Then I left at least 50 words. Like you said, it's difficult actually. So the way I've planned it was, while I was talking about the modules and talking about the knowledge and skills I will gain from each modules, I made sure that they were not more than 250 words. I think I left about 70 words to finally then talk about my dissertation. So after, after I wrote, I think 230 words or 240 words, there were still about 60 words count left. Then I now use that to talk about my dissertation. That, okay, my proposed dissertation is this, the same thing with what I've discussed in my study outline. Then I now wrote my research questions that what may I have envisaged at likely. I couldn't get enough word count to write it in the study outline. So that was the place for me to now say, okay, this is based on this topic. These are the research questions I hope to answer. Then I talk about how I intend to get answers to this research question. I talk about, if it is, supposing it was a qualitative research, for example, I talk about how I would analyze policies and using the UK as a case study to see how their net zero target is working and what we can learn from it in Nigeria and suggest recommendation. But if I'm using quantitative studies, for example, then I talk about which methodology I plan to use, which data analytics or machine learning or whatever approach I plan to use, and the intended potential outcome of my dissertation as well. So that was how I answered it. But looking back at it now and then, for the detailed plan of studies, looking at my experiences, I personally feel, well, if I was to write it again, I mean, now I will probably say I'm in a better position too because I now have an experience. So I'm probably going to divide them into teaching block one, teaching block two, and then my dissertation. Now, in teaching block one, what are the modules I did? What are the practical lab sessions I took? Are there field trips those kind of stuff? And then basically that's what they call detailed plan of study. So, and how do would they help? Because beyond just describing what the plan of study is, it's also important to talk about the effect, the impact on you, and generally how they can also help you become better or make impact at home. During teaching block two, what are the stuff I did? Did I intern with an organization? Those are things that I also feel could go, and that is why it is, like we always say, some of these things, there are a lot of ways to come about them, unique ways. And so looking back at it, I just feel having a scholar share an experience with you, a lived in experience with you, can give you an idea of what you're likely to face and then how to better put out that plan of study.
I see. Also, this is where you get to talk about the faculty, if you want to
Mm.
talk about it. So, as we mentioned, there's a lot of fuzziness in this. So, if you choose one path where you choose to talk about the research and the aspect, that is it. But if you choose to talk about the course and the institution, this is where you get to talk about the faculty, the people on the program, what the program offers, and the institution. But then, now we are remaining with two essays. This is where we don't get actually to talk too much about these essays because they are more or
Mm-hmm.
less at a personal level. But at this point, I said there's a way I usually say we look at these things. Now, this is where you stop and look back. All these essays have been designed in a way that they're helping you tell a story. Like
Mm.
when you look at it from the outsider point of view, you realize that these essays are designed to help you. Not everybody is a very good writer. So there's a way stories are supposed to be structured in that you begin from a very nice introduction, the one that you did up there at the first question. Then you come all through to how you're going to solve, how the program is going to help you solve. So when you look at this thing very carefully from an outsider point of view, now sit down for 1 second and say, if these questions did not exist, and I had the first block. So that's how I usually review my stories. I had the first block as the first paragraph. The second block, so I'm calling these questions blocks. The second block as maybe the second paragraph all through to the end. Do these stories, so removing the questions in between, do these stories align? Do they tell the same thing? Because you might
Hmm.
find somebody began up there talking about education because my place is dry, people cannot get educated. But then down here, they're talking about maybe, I don't know what, machine learning. You see, if you cannot link that from the top all through down here, then it means
Hmm.
there is a disconnect in your story.
Hmm.
But then, if you want all this information, there's a complete episode about how you guys can do it. But that is my way of doing things. There are a lot of ways on how these things can be done. But now, Segun, we have two essays, and these are, I usually call them, I've called it so many times before, the most favorite essays for me when it comes to Commonwealth scholarships. Because these ones, they help you now tell your story, how you want to tell it. The first is a personal statement, and it tells you to write in 500 words. So summarize the ways in which your personal background has encouraged you to want to make an impact in your home country. I know we have been here for quite some time, so very briefly, how do you design these in 500 words?
Yeah, so in 500 personal background, how Dave. Now, ideally, for most scholarship applicants, what comes to your mind is trying to tell what people now call a story of pity. All these emotional tales about how maybe when growing up you didn't have a sandal, or you had only one school uniform, all this kind of stuff. And but as much as, I mean, it doesn't mean you're lying. But the one thing we now know, or we have now been encouraged to do, is irrespective of how sad or emotional your story is, you still have to show a positive side of how you've developed some sort of resilience. Okay, yes, you can talk about the challenges, but talk about what you still were able to achieve irrespective. Things that shows that this person, if this person comes to this our school, he or she won't complain, won't be giving excuses. There are people who are very, very resilient. So it tells you that while you are trying to talk about personal circumstances and how they've influenced your understanding of things, make sure the overall theme of that story is one of resilience and grit. Basically, how you still manage to probably consistently maintain top grades, even though you had to work part time to self fund, or even though you were the only girl child in your family or in the community to go to school, and how that inspired others. And but most importantly, I tend to advise that if it's possible, if it's not possible, then you just have to come up with a way. But talk about how these personal experiences have also motivated your current studies. For someone like me dealing with climate change, I talked about how floods in those days usually was giving us problem, was giving me and my mom problem. How we go to whenever I go to shops and it's rainy season, we practically be packing waters out, and it became so severe that during the rainy season we don't bother going to shops because we just know that it's inhabitable. Then I think I also talk about how sometimes during my childhood we used to relocate to the village, and then I will spend up to 2 to 3 months there before coming back to the city. And in those 2 to 3 months in the village, I will have to attend schools. And while attending schools, I easily noticed that the quality of education in the villages are different from where I come from. And yet, it was because of flooding I relocated. So I also was able to connect that with my story. But in all of this, basically, I was now able to establish how some of these personal circumstances now made me realize what impact climate change can do to vulnerable populations. And the reason why it now connects to my own desire to study climate change science and policy. Of course, this does not, I haven't talked about my other grades in study. Of course, I also talk about that, how, especially for the challenges, I was still maintaining top grades in my undergrad, how I took up leadership positions and was able to, of course, I've buttressed more on those ones in the voluntary and leadership parts. Then another thing I just feel it's also very important to mention in this part is also how your personal circumstance has motivated or have been a fuel to your proposed impact. Like if you noticed the two major plan I mentioned from the beginning, I talk about training climate techies. Then I also talk about establishing climate change clubs in schools. But before all those ones, I have already been working in the education sector. So I've been doing one or two. Like I co-founded an initiative. This was under my personal study. I also mentioned that I co-founded an initiative and I've been doing one or two intervention programs. But why did I co-found this initiative and what motivated some of these programs I have been carrying out even at the grassroots without a scholarship? I talk about how my personal circumstances also. So basically, this is an opportunity beyond just your very emotional story about your background. It's another opportunity. It's an opportunity to also then show how you have risen beyond those personal circumstances to become someone who is now inspiring a generation or who is inspiring someone that and possibly show evidence of how you have been doing it. I don't even have a scholarship, but I've been doing this. But imagine if I get this scholarship and if I now get to meet a lot of people, network, then I will definitely make more impact. So I'm providing an evidence that I'm already doing this. But with your investment in me, I could even do more. So it ends with a promise or an happy ending. And it's not something that it just has to be sad or emotional or true. So that is how I approach that part.
The last one is about leadership and voluntary work that you've participated in. This is also a 500-word essay. And a lot of fresh graduates find it difficult to make arguments on this regard because different people have different views about leadership
Yeah.
and how they understand what leadership entails. But then, in your view, assuming I just left college, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year, and I earned my bachelor's, how would I frame my answers to this specific question regarding leadership and voluntary activities?
Like you just left
Yeah,
your.
I'm saying that specifically because I know it could be easier for the other person who has stayed for some time to pick
Mm,
up
mm,
from this information and
mm.
build on what they have.
Yeah, this is actually very true because 500 words. I remembered for me, it was not even enough to talk about many things. And that was because I've been a graduate for 4 years. I was working. Initially, I wasn't really so interested in scholarship. So I was working. Before I decided I was going to apply for scholarship. And because of some of the stuff I've done at the grassroots, there were so many examples I couldn't use all of them. But for someone who is a fresh graduate, yes, it can be dicey because you are still new. But this is where you need to think deep. Think about stuff, positions you've held. And this is why it's usually advisable that whenever, even as a student, be intentional about what you do, particularly as co-curricular activities. You have a position for maybe course rep or class monitor. It could even be just a group leader in a project. Take them. It's not just so that you do more than others or you invest more time more than I mean that is one of those things we tend to be mindful. But it's also to build leadership experiences. Your co-curricular activities as well, doing holidays. I mean, thankfully nowadays, I think this generation of students are becoming very intentional about that. There are a lot of volunteering opportunities out there. When I was an undergraduate, I wasn't really getting much, or I did get much, but I never really thought they could help me. But in today, when everyone now knows the importance of this, think about those areas where you volunteered. I mean, in your community, we do that. It could be probably assisting as a youth, as part of the youth in the community, assisting the community leader to maybe erect something or to you take turns. There are just a whole lot of things. It's just about thinking about the impacts of some of these little things you have done and what differences have they made in that community, and then telling a story. Basically, just focusing on what you have done as part of that group or even individually. So there's always something that has been done, but sometimes we often neglect it. So start with some of those little positions you think are little, whether as a group leader, as a class captain, as a laboratory prefect. It could start even from secondary school. Now, think about what you did and the impact it's made. For example, as a group leader in a project, what did you do and how did you manage your team to make sure the project you guys did was successful? That is an example of leadership. Outside academics, in your community, in what areas have you contributed to something that can be termed as community development, basically? And what are your roles in those areas? So there's always something everybody, except you are just maybe all your life you just don't you are just on your own. But it's almost impossible. When you think about these things, you always find these stories.
We,
But I just believe, like you said, storytelling is just the issue. How do you tell the
yeah.
story in a way that it's meant to?
We usually say at this point, even if you don't have as much, think of the tiniest things possible you can write. Somebody actually told
Mhm.
me, if you are out of ideas completely, talk about how you do things at a family level. Maybe then you can. I mean, like if you could, you have never been in any leadership role, you have never volunteered, you've never, but at least you even take some initiative at a family level. So think, just be creative, come up with something about that. We've had quite some long conversation, and I hope somebody who has listened to this conversation this far, they've actually gotten insights from your perspective. And we are going to do one extra episode in future about the general life. This is about the application, but there's also about
Mhm.
the life of a scholar. And those are two completely different things. But then you, as a scholar, are currently planning to go on to a PhD. Congratulations, because that's a big
Thank
step.
you.
How did it go?
Yeah. So I think it started December last year. I was
Allow me to cut you short. When did you join? So that we know we work with the timelines
yes.
here.
Okay, yeah. So why did I join? So after 2 weeks into my program, I was already thinking of how do I apply these skills back home. Now, like I said, most people, our understanding of climate change has always been from the developmental aspect. But my own course of study has mostly been on the science aspects, earth system modeling, understanding the earth system, the physical, and whatever. And I asked myself, how do I make an impact with this study? I don't have a job, definitely. So if I'm going back home, I would definitely need to apply for a job. And then in my new role, in what way would this knowledge I have gained help me make sure that the investments made on me by the Commonwealth is being felt in my country? So when I thought about it very well, I was very honest with myself. I realized that there was really no way unless I become someone like an expert in that field, like whether it's as a researcher or an academics. But I still realized that just having a master's and then going to Nigeria isn't going to help much. I wasn't really sure of my pathway. Let me use that word because I thought about, okay, if I want to go to a research institute to work, which research institute can I work? And will I be given the freedom to actually do the type of research I want to do as a master's degree holder? Or would having a PhD gives me more of that freedom? So by the time I thought about it, thoroughly, I realized I really need a PhD to make this impact. Probably if I had studied another course, I can always go back to Nigeria, work somewhere, and I'll be making that impact. But for climate change sciences, I soon realized that having a PhD would definitely help. So that was when I decided that, you know what, I'm going to apply for a PhD. And initially, I'll be very honest with you, I wasn't really too interested in the UK. My applications were in the US. I think I submitted about four of them. And that was because I don't have a master's. So I have heard that in the US, you can have a direct BSc to PhD. But in the UK, it is also possible, but I have since noticed it's mostly for the home students because of the nature of the program here, where there's a combined BSc and MS like so. But for an international student, it takes, I don't know, some sort of trust that you will finish your MSc for them to want to give you that chance. So I wasn't really too interested in the US, in the UK. I just applied to the US and I applied to just about 4 schools because of the application fee and the other requirements. But somehow, the election came and I realized this man is going to win. I don't want to be too political, but it just seems as if the US might not just, it's just better to have options. So I told myself, okay, let me see from other countries and let's see if I can get opportunities. So I saw some UK opportunities from findthephd.com. That is the website I use. And I said, oh, things, some of these projects actually look like something I'm interested in. I mean, they fit into some of what I'm currently doing. So let me apply. And I applied to a couple of them. And by February, I got an interview invite, one from the United States and then one from the UK school, from the University of York. I attended the both. I attended the one for the US first. I attended the one for the UK as well, and then I started expecting outcome. And the outcome for the US, surprisingly up until now, never came because Trump came and then the funds somehow got whatever. So each time I talked to the prophet, it was like, they're in the process of still trying to get their funds, but it never came up to now. Not even a rejection up to now. But that of the UK came, and I was just glad I didn't rely on the US alone. So that was how I. But if you need more questions on the application process and the interview, I could also share. But that was just a summary of
Yeah, that
both.
would
Yes.
be another whole
Yeah,
episode. And I know it is the PhD application is not something that can be talked in just 5 minutes.
yeah.
So I really appreciate you setting aside your time to share with us the ideas and how you went about the application. Now, there are 2 questions I would ask of you. One, what is your now that you're about to finish your masters? What is your general view about this whole program?
The
Yes,
Commonwealth or the
Commonwealth.
first. Oh yeah, general view, life changing experience, and I'll tell you why. Beyond academics, I don't know. I like using the word beyond academics because I'm someone who sees life beyond extracurricular meetings, events. They just help. This scholarship has connected me with people I would never have thought in my life. I was in London this week for a British Nigerian Education Trust because I was invited by the head of trustee of the accommodation I lived in. She's basically that connected. I've met the mayor of Bath twice. She's always inviting me to events, and I was in London. And right there, I met an MP from Labour, who is actually of Nigerian heritage. And I just told her, okay, yeah, I love this of what you guys are doing, how you guys are funding education projects in Nigeria, because I was once in education before coming here and I'm still interested in making impact. It's still part of my career plans and the developmental impact I plan to do when I go. And I have some mentees who are doing this, and just from sharing, I was able to get their contacts. Like just get contacts. They are expecting. Some of them even reached out to me. Like they reached out to me before. I've still not reached out to some of them already, and they've already reached out to me. And I thought, and I tell myself, how would I have met this set of people if I hadn't won this scholarship? So that is what the scholarship does to you. Beyond just the academic dream of studying in the UK, having that degree, the connections, the networks you build. Just don't know.
Sometimes I usually feel like if it were possible, we could give everybody watching this conversation this thing because people do try. They try their best
Yeah,
when they're making an application, but sometimes not everybody always gets it. Now,
yeah.
what do you have to say to this prospect who is just listening to this conversation and they're now just about to sit down and start writing their application?
Hey, so what I would just tell you as a prospect, let me be honest with you. Early preparation always work. And when I mean early preparation, it starts right from the moment you finish watching this video. A good thing you should do, go to the Commonwealth website, look at the overview again. Don't wait till the application opens before you understand how the process works. Understand it even before the application opens. Now, understanding it before the application opens then mean you have enough time to assess yourself where you currently stand. Where do you think you are inadequate? There are four selection criteria. They've said academic merit, the potential to make impact, and some other things. And there are some primary and secondary indicators. Check these things. Which one do you think you have strong case for? And which one do you think are likely area of weaknesses? Between now and when the application opens, is there a way you can bridge this gap? Is there a publication you don't have and that you think just probably you could collaborate with? Maybe you have a friend who is working on something or a researcher and you can contribute 1 or 2 cents to work on. Or even if it's just an article. I mean, anything just shows you are contributing to general knowledge or a blog post. Also, is there a way you can improve on your volunteer leadership? Maybe you have been avoiding a leadership position. Maybe this is the right time to now think of accepting that leadership position because you never can tell what you can get from it between now and when you start the application. Your volunteering experience, all of these things. So basically, preparation should start now. That is the summary of what I'm saying. So immediately you finish watching this video, go to the website, check the overview, check the requirements, start making a preparation now. Don't wait till when the application opens.
I don't think I will add anything, but to just say that was Bamidele Segun, and this is the Management Diary. I'm your host, Omar Joseph, and until we get to meet you again in the next episode, bye bye.
Bye.